taught it my whole life, you know. And I think a lot of people who grew up under societies that have been massively influenced by colonialism and imperialism, especially the education system, this is often how we're taught history, right? That you know, everybody else has no history, and the history of the world is the history of European civilization, which again is that they pick the bits they want to claim, right? But this kind of medieval age here, what they don't tell you is all the other wonderful, amazing, vibrant cultures that were popping up and, you know, existing for thousands of years before, or at the same time when Europe was in its so-called Middle Ages, right? Dying of plague and struggling with all these other things, all these other vibrant things around the world were taking root and expanding, developing, and being what they were. But we're not taught these things because to have knowledge of that is dangerous to the enemy, right? To the idea of white supremacy and European supremacy. And so these stories that are told to us, about us, right? Whether it's, you know, that we're the killer of their god, or you know, that we are equivalent to Satan and they are equivalent to virtue and godliness. Europeans, when I say they, and European society and civilization, or if we're freaks to be poked at, or to, you know, to be degraded and mocked. All of it is to justify their violence and to justify their colonialism and to justify the theft of our lands and the theft of resources of our lands and the transportation and the transformation of humans into property. And again, you know, with something like the transatlantic slave trade, which of course my ancestors in the Caribbean would have been greatly affected by, and the whole world has been greatly affected by it. What they don't tell us is that the reason why it stopped is because we were constantly rebelling. We're told in England that it was, you know, the abolitionists freed us, you know, out of the virtue of the heart. You know, I'm not saying the abolitionists didn't do work, but slavery was made untenable by the constant rebellions on every island and every place where there was slavery. And that's dangerous knowledge when once you find that out, it changes who you are and how you see yourself and how you see us as a people. And so this idea, you know, that we're constantly being told who we are, that whether it's we're the most violent people in any given society, also at the same time are stupid idiots who, you know, the butt of the jokes are made about us whenever that's necessary. You know, the Africans are cannibals who you know, practice all these strange things. And this is constantly just woven into the fabric of the societies that a lot of us live in, whether that's on the continent, in former colonies, whether that's in the Caribbean, in former colonies, whether that's in London, where I grew up, in other parts of Europe, other parts of the world. This seeps into the world that we exist in. This is in Brazil, for example. And it's just, yeah, it's constant, and it's constantly used to justify the violence, whether that was on the slave ships or in the plantation or in the colony or in Jim Crow or under apartheid, or in the constant and ongoing genocide that's happening in Congo and in Gaza right now. We're constantly told who we are in order to justify the violence that's done to us. So instead of Africa, for example.
Did we just lose him? Yeah. No, okay, let me just tell him that we... Have we got the Wi-Fi? Is Bokhoshi back with the Wi-Fi? What's happening?
You know, because it affects the way that we see ourselves. And
sorry, Nathan, Nathan, I do just want to let you know that we did lose you for about a couple of seconds. So I'm not sure if you would mind just backtracking like 3 sentences before what you were saying now.
Did you hear me talking about the cultures we've created, or is it after that?
Just go back to that slide. The cultures we've created. I think that that's probably what we missed.
Okay, so yeah, just like you know, in Africa, around the world, in diaspora, we've created hip hop culture. We've created all these other incredible things. You know, from the blues to reggae to hip hop to amapiano now, and and Afrobeats taking over the world and taking over dance floors all over the world. Instead of us being represented like this, we're often, Africa in particular is shown as this, and depicted and told to us and told to the world as this place of, you know, heathens and impoverished people, backward people, they love to say this term in England, in need of aid, right? And this aid is always given in order to justify stealing more, right? And taking more from us as a people and from our lands and resources. And so, to me, that is dangerous knowledge, right? To be told about yourself through the eyes of people who seek to do you violent harm constantly. And so I've kind of been figuring out ways to create and to, you know, it's been a long time coming, and it's an ongoing project, learning what I would consider the truth or you know, true perspectives of who we are as a people and what we do and how we should view ourselves. And to me, the idea of that is dangerous knowledge, dangerous for us and dangerous to the plans of the enemy. And so I've tried to, and I'm trying to strive to make work that not only tells this story, right, and tells this different way of doing things, but also that then doesn't recreate the ethos and reinforce the philosophy of white supremacy and colonial thinking. By making work that is created in a different way. And so the idea of, you know, like the auteur director who is this genius who oversees everything and everybody else involved is just like a chess piece or a puppet under their control. To me, it's this idea of this individual, which isn't valuable. It's also not true. You know, there's so much work, and you will all know, goes into TV and film or to art or to music. And even though people get credit sometimes, not enough in the art world. You know, I took a long time to learn that a lot of painters don't paint their own paintings, right? Which to me is wild, and they don't credit the people who do. So even though film, for example, has critics, there's still this idea that there are these geniuses who are above everybody else. And to me, like, I've tried to make this work in such a way that undoes that or doesn't lean on that and doesn't reinforce it. And so everybody involved is valued. Everybody who collaborates on this. You know, I don't have the skills to do what is necessary to create this project. I didn't go to film school, I didn't go to art school, I studied philosophy and critical theory, and I've only really studied music to a sort of minimal fun you know, amount. But I've spent my life figuring out how to put words together over music and to create the music that goes with it. I've been honored and blessed to be part of several collectives guerrilla filmmakers and, you know, independent writers who've come together to create work that isn't welcome in a lot of places because we work in this way. We are the kind of keepers of dangerous knowledge and the tellers of dangerous stories that undo those things that would be done to us, right? And fight against the violence that is done to us. And we connect with people who do the same. And so it's often a harder road to walk. We don't get a lot of endorsements. We don't get a lot of money given to us. We have to fight for everything that we have, and we're constantly under attack to have our spaces taken away, but that's normal. It's normal for us as a people to have these things done to us when you're not just doing what is expected of you in the so-called right way of doing things, because that right way too often reinforces the philosophy of those who would do us this violence and do us this violence. And so with Drummer Warrior Storyteller Part 1, the first film, it started off as music, it started off as a music album, and then I wanted to interpret it into film. And when I came across the work of Audre Lorde in particular, a lot of the way I felt about this my whole life, when you learn these things, I'm sure a lot of you will feel the same way, is anger. You know, it's normal to, you know, when you hear about what's been done to us as a people, when you've experienced police brutality, lack of opportunity, things being constantly taken from you, people attacking you in the street, just for being who you are. I'm angry about it, and I'd have people come up to me and say, when they hear me perform or whatever, be like, oh, you don't let them tell you you're angry, you're passionate. And I'd be like, no, I'm fucking angry. You know what I mean? And that's fine. It's a good response. And I heard Audre Lorde say this. You know, her response to racism is anger. She's lived with it, ignoring it, feeding upon it most of her life. She says she suckled from the wolf's lip of anger and used it for illumination and laughter and protection and fire in places where there was no light and no food, no sisters, no quarter. It was really vindicating to know that this is the correct way to feel and to make from this place, you know. And so it's a shame we can't watch the films, or you get the chance to watch them. It's all up online to view. But yeah, we made this work in a way that kind of challenged a lot of the ways of doing things conventionally. And so I linked with these two great friends, Steph B and Musafiri, to explain what I wanted to do, and they challenged me to be like, well, what are you reading, what are you interested in, what are you into, and I explained a lot of these things and connected with a lot of people to say this isn't about me telling my story, it's about us telling our story, right? And so brought in a lot of people who I know have been affected by these things to tell their perspective. And Muti managed to get hold of this giant warehouse in the middle of the pandemic when things like that were very, very difficult, and put together this brilliant team of filmmakers and artists and actors and dancers to be able to bring this work together. And it was quite difficult for some people because these people, a lot of them are professionals. They're used to being a DOP or a choreographer, and you go in and you do a specific role, and they come to me to talk about it. We have these long reasoning sessions about how do they feel about this, what would they like to put into it, how would they like to see the work be made. And there was this kind of risk that it would be sort of too many cooks kind of spoiling it, but to me it turned out brilliantly, and it enabled me to be able to tell more stories than just my own, and not be trying to tell other people's stories, but to allow them to put their being and their existence into the work. And not only did we manage to get different stories told, we managed to tell the stories in different mediums. So Akua McMorris, who was one of the inspirations behind the work and one of the scenes, and she was one of the cinematographers, she created these portraits of the characters that we created that are in the film. These are kind of friends and family and pillars of our community, put into these kind of ancestral, future ancestor roles. Managed to get their pictures and have them as part of the process. Dora Lamb, who's a brilliant live painter, she paints the jazz scene in particular in London, the live music scene. She came in and captured the essence of what we were doing in a particular scene as well. I'm gonna skip this just because I know we're short on time, but created this brilliant triptych that captured the energy of the dancers and the feeling in the room when we were filming. And we just kept drawing out these stills from the film, all of these different things that were done, and all of this has now gone into the exhibition, which the film is. And to me, it's I call this a living album. To me, it's challenging the boundaries of what a music album is and can be by translating the music into as many different mediums as we can. And for me, it's not about me creating work or us creating work. To me, the project has a life of its own, and all we are as mediums to be able to bring it into the form that we can bring it into. And so we're constantly adding to this work, and this was probably the most poignant point of that manifestation in the first film, is that we filmed a particular scene where we wanted to use paint, and none of us really considered the fact if we threw a bunch of paint around with a bunch of crump dancers onto a canvas that we would create a painting. But when we finished, kind of walked in there and was like, wow, we've made this thing that is now part of the exhibition. People can walk into there and experience it. But I also spent a lot of time to document it and brought these images out of it with the photography that are now also make up part of the exhibition and the language of the film. So, the language of the album. And then we exhibited. So this is the first exhibition that we did with the work. We drummed, we danced, we had the Orisha priestesses of the Akan and Yoruba traditions come in and do what we do to make sure that the ancestors are present in the place and in the spot, and have been all the way through. And so, yeah, I don't know, I'm mindful we're short of time, but there's a bit more on sort of the second part. But I don't know if anyone wanted to speak or ask any questions at this point about.
I think it might be more instructive right now to actually have a conversation and to see if anyone has hands. But I'm going to use my power and privilege as the moderator to actually engage you a little bit. I was thinking about the first statement you made about nothing as dangerous as colonialism and racism, and the kind of radical work that you're doing. And I thought of Toni Morrison's very famous words about the nature of racism and the nature of, if you want to add it here, the nature of discrimination, the nature of hate. And I'm going to read it to you because I had to find it while you were talking. She says, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. I'm just probing your brain here, right? It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you from explaining. It keeps you explaining, rather, over and over again, your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language, and you spent 20 years, proving that you do. And then going back to what you were talking about, how black people have been painted as, these dumb people who don't know anything, as less than. So, someone says you have no language and you spent 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that actually it is. Somebody says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says that you have no kingdoms, so you dredge that up too. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing. Obviously I just want us to straddle. Have we lost him again?
No, I'm here.
Oh. So I really want us to straddle the fine line between the possibilities of a collision on the one end of radicalism. What are we losing you? Are you muted? Is there a place for kind of radical black consciousness politics within the arts? Considering, I love the nature of your work, that there's a kind of transgressive, a kind of disruptive, and a kind of fighting against progressive structures. But I want to poke your brain here in terms of what is the fine line between being reactive to kinds of racist forms of hate and finding your own voice that stands up individually, autonomously, without being reactive to that kind of hate and that kind of racism.
I think that's sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, you can.
I think it's a really important point, and I think it's when you were talking through the Toni Morrison quote, I'm gonna share my screen again just to show you how the irony of that is just that was the next slide, is that
that's so cool.
But it shows that I think how well your brain works, that is the thing that was kind of missing for me from that first part, right? Is that it was very much this kind of this focus on fighting and this view on battling back against, right? And I'll come out of it, but to me it was like, it's a really important point, and through that process I realized that so when I was about 25, I released my first album. I was doing an interview with someone, and we were talking about the politics of the album and all the ideas that I've been sort of wrestling with. And then she said to me out of nowhere, was like, well, what makes you happy? And I couldn't answer the question. For a good 5 minutes, I was sitting there in silence, trying to rack my brain and get out of this mentality of, radical politics to be like, well, what makes you happy? And eventually I said something along the lines of, being happy is selfish, and I can't be happy until everybody's free and all this kind of stuff. And for a 25-year-old, to be that, entrenched in this way of thinking, that, you're not even allowed to allow yourself happiness is dangerous. That's a dangerous mindset to be in, right? And it is this reactive thing, whereas I think if one of the things that colonialism and enslavement and all this violence sought to take from us is happiness and is joy and is the ability to live and love, to have those things and to take those things back, right? To live a life of enjoyment and pleasure and happiness is a victory in itself. If that's one of the goals, is to steal these things from us, right? And so part two of the work was very much about this, a celebration of love and a celebration of joy. Because then if you spend all of your life and all of your time battling against Babylon and battling against this oppression, not only do you risk spending your entire life doing only, but you also you miss an opportunity to create something new. And that's what I've really, at this point, when we started making part 2, it was like, now, what kind of world can we start to create? You know, what in the world building of the work, right? We wanted to actively be talking about polytemporal, intergenerational love and care and happiness. You know, and that's what that second part is about. And that Toni Morrison quote was a big part. I'm gonna just share the screen again.
That's good.
Quickly, just.
And I mean, it's funny because you mentioned Audre Lorde as well. I mean, I think she also has a quote about the inability to use the master's tools to break the master's house, right?
Exactly.
And I was just thinking about, again, if I take you back to the question of radicalism, if you know, however way you define radicalism, because I imagine each one of us here would have their own definition. Like how do you position yourself around exactly what you've shown here? And again, Audre Lorde, whom you've already cited, particularly around the quote of, you can never use the master's tools to basically destroy the master's house. You know, how do you respond to that?
I think we see it a lot, right? And you know, for me, there's a lot of talking, you know, about black capitalism and, you know, black entrepreneurship, and man, we got a lot of rich black people who are playing the game. And, you know, I guess yes, with money you can do certain things, but you're never gonna dismantle international global capitalism, right? Which is, you know, colonial in nature, which is the source of the problem, right? The literal finances that created contemporary capitalism and the banking systems and everything else that comes along with it is the money that was made from slavery and colonialism, right? And so you're stuck in this loop of constantly just reinforcing the actual problem if you just continue to use the master's tools, right? And so not only do we need new tools, we need new radical imaginations of how we can do it. And I think that's one thing, is that we're often who we are as a people and what we do and our nature. And again, without reducing all of African diasporic people to one thing, but so many of the indigenous practices around the world are about connection, are about, you know, oneness with the land and each other, of not seeing the individual as somehow separate from everything, who needs to conquer everything, right? This idea of a more harmonious way of viewing things. If we just can start to live in different ways, right, the fight can be less about trying to conquer an enemy and can be more about defending the things that we build when the enemy comes, right? And we'll be more able and equipped to do that if we know who we are and what we're trying to do, and if we're just living in a way that almost disregards the things that are being done to us. That's hard. That's easy to say and hard to do when bombs are being dropped on your house. Do you know what I mean? Or when, you know, you're being displaced and armies are running through and forcing you into labor camps, for example. Do you know what I mean? But like, for those of us who aren't in those situations, we need to be able to be doing what we can in order to help the people who are in those situations, regardless of the situations that we are in. And that way of viewing ourselves, you know, not viewing what's happening in Gaza as separate to what's happening in London. It's all one giant enemy that needs to be fought, right? And I think that, to me, is something that's really important. This quote for me from Omowale Potem, which was something that really struck me recently, was this idea that, you know, what we're going through is also a tiny fraction of the eons of existence that African people and humanity and this universe has had, right? It's a tiny dot in our actual history, right? And through all of this, all these other things have been happening, and other things are happening now, even as this violence is happening, right? And so the part 2 and the work that we're continuing to do is about trying to reconnect with that oneness, right, and reconnect with that joy and just build alternatives. And if the work that we're doing is seen as a way of world building, not only within the film and within the universe of the project, but as a paradigm for ways to live and do things different, to value things differently, right? This work here in particular, like this, the idea of this rope that was taken to hang us, for example, can be repurposed as something that we use to celebrate ourselves, you know? It's finding these victories and finding this, to me, that is radical, right? The kind of, I got very lost in the kind of kind of radical socialist or Marxist, way of doing these things, of this idea of the constant struggle. And it grated on me for a long time. To me, the goal of a struggle is not to just struggle indefinitely. You know what I mean? And when people say that, some people literally say that the struggle goes on forever. And like, yo, I'm trying to chill. You know what I mean? Like, my people have been under constant duress for centuries and forced work. You know what I mean? And what I would give to my descendants, is not to give them a struggle to inherit. I want to give them freedom and liberation and the opportunity to relax and become anything that they choose to be. You know what I mean? And that's what I wish for my descendants. I wish them love, I wish them care and joy, not to inherit a struggle, right? But then equally, I want them to be able to know the situation they're in and prepare them for it. You know what I mean? And it would be doing them a disservice to pretend that the world is all great and wonderful when it's not. But I also have to be, and I think we have to be mindful that if we're just constantly saying life is terrible, life is terrible, life is terrible, it will remain terrible. You know what I mean? If we're saying that life can be, and even in the hull of a slave ship, there would have been intimacy. There would have been care. There would have been someone holding someone else's hand saying, we're going to be all right.
Nathan, let me grab some hands from the audience. I mean, I wish we had more time, because I would have again have a conversation about the unevenness of liberalist, Marxist, progressive politics